Hello everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Project Strengthcast, right? Thank you for all the support on the first episode. It was a lot more than what we had anticipated. And we did get a lot of DMs, so we want to kind of make episode 2 and 3 kind of focused about fundamental concepts and topics that when you start to get a better idea of these things, you get a better understanding of how to think about programming. I think a lot of people are afraid of programming not because of what could go wrong, but when something does go wrong, what they should do next to kind of rectify it, right? I don't think anyone's afraid of making a mistake. I think people get afraid when they make a mistake and don't have a way out of it, right? And that's why these topics, Tapas and I thought were like, if you have fundamental understanding of these things start to look really, really good in the long run for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the major things that I just want to mention here for people who are watching right now and kind of considering that, oh, it's a longer thing, do I want to watch? On our first episode, we had like one dude messages, and he was telling us that I put this on my story as well. He was telling us that like he learned more from the first episode than he did from a pretty popular course which certifies coaches. So like take from that what you will. I just wanted to say that in the sense like we are going to be providing pretty valuable information, just kind of structured in a structured manner, which is like I feel the most important thing we are doing here. So yeah, it would be pretty beneficial to you and to your training if you're just able to sit through this and understand whatever we're going to be talking about. Today we're going to be discussing up till point number 4, and we're going to be talking from point number 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 in the next episode. We were initially going to do all of this now, but we just decided that we just want more time and freedom to talk about the topics properly. So we're going to give this whole episode to the first 4 topics, which are very important, so we can't really skim through them. And these are kind of, they're going to teach you how to think about whatever we're going to talk about, and after that we're going to be teaching you how to apply them and how to actually use them in your own programming. All right, so like let's not waste any more time. Let's get directly into it. Our first topic is going to be top down and bottom up programming. So I'll let Jay begin.
I think one of the most important things that so I've done a few mentorships. I work with like Norman from Strong Ambitions now, and the most important thing I've known from all these guys is that it's very important to learn how to think about something, right? How do you want to approach a problem? If you work with any of these coaches, you'll hear about them talk about the idea of models of thinking, right? You'll have models on programming, models on biomechanics, just models on just approaching a problem, right? So when a person approaches you, be it an athlete, gen pop, whatever, right? You want to start to understand how do you want to approach this problem, and can you have certainty and flexibility, right? So like, top down is more in terms of like we want to have, I would classify top down as a bit more of the element of rigidity, right? We want to kind of think about top down is going to be about almost reverse engineering a process. Say like you have a powerlifting meet 15 weeks out, right? The mindset of top down programming is the fact that it's 15 weeks out, and then we want to kind of reverse engineer that thing back to week 1. So we kind of have an idea of like there has to be structure, right? Top down is kind of giving rigid structure towards a thing we want to work towards, right? It is the foundation which we want to work towards. So we want to be like at week 5, we want to be here. Ideally, week 10, we want to be here. By week 15, we want to be where we want to be and compete at the best possible outcome, right? So when you're designing a program, you need to have, when you're designing a program for a specific outcome, let's go with that, right? You need to have some amount of rigidity in your programming approach, right? You need to have like a time constraint or you'll have multiple constraints which you can get to at a later episode, but you want to think in terms of a fixed pathway and create everything according to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's also like what we talk about when we say like, oh, you need to peak for a comp or like with a comp in mind, as Jay said. Like, when do you start accumulating? How do you? And this is also like what we set as a goal for the end of a macro cycle. We're gonna explain that in this video as well. For the bottom up approach, which is kind of like it's kind of like the opposite of the top down. It's pretty so basically what the bottom up approach is that it gives you a lot more freedom with programming. You kind of start with the now and you go as, you could just say, you go as things progress. So essentially, if I were to explain it in a very simple manner, in a top down approach, your entire life is kind of going to revolve around your program, because you need to adapt to whatever is written in there. Like it's kind of like a percentage based system. Like we spoke about this the last time also. A percentage does not take into account things that change in daily life, things like external sleep, stress, whatever. With a bottom up approach, however, you have a method of programming, method of training, which takes your lifestyle into account while the program runs. So as like you can, the program by itself kind of emerges from the data, the strategies, the reactive, emerging strategies and all. It kind of emerges from the data. But the issue with the bottom up approach is that you are kind of going to be training with no real goal inside. So that is like an issue that you run into when you're talking about a bottom up programming, bottom up way of programming.
Yeah. I just add a thing there. It's like when you talk about like I'd say like bottom up programming is the fact that you're writing something and letting the athlete evolve into that.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
And you want to have structure because what are they evolving towards? If you do not have an end goal, how do you kind of at the end, like even the emerging strategies approach, right? Like you at the end of a microcycle, you're designing the next golden cycle. When that thing stops working based off of some output you want to kind of get to, right? So like you understand that you need, I would say like this, you need certainty and you need flexibility in terms of how you are going to get to that element of certainty, right? So if I like, you can think top down. Why does it emerge from a Soviet era kind of systems? Because in the Soviet Union, when you look at people, well, they were within a fixed system. They didn't have any life outside of their like sport. The government would pay for everything. That entire life revolved around that.
Exactly.
Right? So daily readiness becomes a lot more easy to kind of measure, and you can kind of go this like pure percentage based programming structure. But like as Tapas said, real life today has a lot of fluctuations, right? I, as a coach, if I think in 15 weeks my athlete has to be here and I solely employ like pure percentage based programming, I fail to take into account how that person's life, personal life, professional life, these things evolve. So how does that kind of fit into my programming system, right? And that's where you get things like RP, which is like, I know, I even got a DM from a guy asking like, how do you look at RP-based programming and percentage-based programming? Well, RP points are attached to certain percentages.
True.
Right?
True.
Right? And like, if, as dumb as this may be, a single at RP 10 is a single at 100%. Like, single at RP 8 is like 92%. So, like, the reason we use, because I just want to harp on this thing. I think people should kind of understand this thing. You want to find 92% of your one rep max for that day. Yes. But you don't know where that is because your life is very volatile.
Absolutely.
So what do? I'll ask you for a single at RP8, which you think it is. You see, percentage program says pure accuracy. RPE says good enough. All right. So top down wants pure accuracy and pure rigidity. Bottom up wants is flexibility. And when top down, bottom up based programming is like, well, you're using RPE to get a certain percentage and you're kind of getting this thing, right? I would argue, don't think about top down, bottom up only from this RPE percentage based thing. It's one example. But what I do want to mention is also understand that a coach can predict 15 weeks out, I need to be here, but 6 weeks in, you got injured. Or like first block of training, first block or time frame of training ends, and your like training is not responding how you want it to. All right. So can you stick to the original plan? No. All right. So you gotta evolve a strategy and be flexible with the athlete's response. So like athlete response, bottom up, coach like guidance, top down.
Yeah. And just like a little point there, like, so when you talk about the RP and the percentage differences, so this is what we were talking about initially, what we meant when we were saying flexibility. So when you follow a percentage based program, you're going to be kind of looking at it, um, measuring that percentage from a one rep max that you hit on a very ideal day, with ideal conditions. But as Jay said, you're really just not going to be in those conditions every single day. Hence, the percentage will not really be accurate all of the time, especially for people who have a general life outside of being an athlete. On a certain day, so like if I give you absolute numbers for an example, this is just an example. Let's say you squatted 200 kilos at the best condition of your life. You were completely rested, best condition. It is not like guaranteed that, like, let's say 12 weeks from 12 weeks after that you will be able to do 190 kilos at RP8. It could be more, it could be less, just on the basis of what's been happening with your life. Like if you don't sleep well today, hell, even 175 could come at an RP8, right? Yep. So that is what we mean when we say flexibility. You knowing your own body and just understanding how to auto regulate off the basis of your externals for the day to follow the program, but also understand that the numbers will differ day to day. You don't really need to have this gradual increase every single week, uh, uh, unless it's like everything is just in perfect conditions.
Yeah, I'd say like this: the more certain someone's life is outside of the gym, the more top down heavy you can be.
Yeah,
Coach can be,
absolutely.
right? And I'd also say, like, if someone, like, you'll see this thing, right? If you work with someone on a RP based program, and you see, like, if they repeat a certain load on a certain lift, their RP climbs up a bit. This is not an absolute rule. Yep. This is a rough rule. One RP point is about 3 to 2.5%, right? So, like, if I see, okay, this guy does this load, and when he repeats that load on 2 blocks back to back, like, I've asked him for 5 reps at RP5, he does this. Like, he uses 100 kilos, but on the next one it goes to, like, he uses 100 again, but it becomes from RP5 to RP6. I can see that this reduction in performance is happening, right? So I can see almost like a pattern emerge, right? So I can have top set at single at 5, then the next set can be -5% or -7%, just to account for the first. But this is essentially us saying the fact that you need to have a system that is rigid, but within that system, you need to allow for flexibility. You need to kind of allow for an evolving athlete, because this is the probably most important thing. What works now probably will not work in the future. Yeah. Because that athlete you wrote the initial program for is, if it's successful or dog shit, right, will not be the same athlete in 10 weeks' time, right? They are evolving. The athlete is a constantly moving target that you're trying to program for.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is also like where we come to when we talk about why kind of combining both of these approaches just makes sense, especially for like regular athletes. By regular athletes I mean the most common person who is an athlete as well, who has like a life outside of being an athlete. You work a job, you go to college, whatever. Combining them makes sense for somebody like that who also wants to compete, um, just off the benefits of both of them. You take the best of both worlds and then you create a program that kind of works for both of them. So when you talk about top down in this way, it kind of serves as a um, it kind of serves like a footprint. Like, it gives you just a idea, it gives you a goal to base your whole training cycle around. But when you look at like the smaller versions, like when you just go deeper into the training cycle itself, you're able to auto regulate on a daily basis. So it's like the best of both worlds. That's what I mean when I say combining them.
Right. So anyone you kind of like, if your program can't involve an athlete, your system is just inherently flawed, right? And it doesn't have in all capacities. You just have to understand top down is just rigidity, bottom up is flexibility. You want to have a rigid system that allows for flexibility because things are moving in nature, right? So you want to design, you want to have certainty in where you're going, but you want to have some amount of leeway in terms of how you get there. If I could argue that,
Absolutely.
right? Right. So like that is how I would kind of like look into this thing. All right. And that's about it. Like I think in my mind, if you are too rigid, you can't account for the athlete. If you're too flexible, you can't account for the goal. So both ways, you're kind of like lost in the sauce, right?
Yeah. And when you combine both of them, you're just able to, again, as I said, use the best of both worlds, and you're also going to be eliminating the individual cons that each of the systems have. And
Yeah,
it's just a really good way of programming. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that is the most important thing. Like, you're trying to take out, like, okay, throwing back to, like, shout out to Kyle Dawes from Compound Performance. This is where I first heard this thing. I'm sure it may not have come from, but he's like, all models, like, we're talking about programming models, we talk about biomechanical models, all models are right, but all models are also wrong in that they have certain limitations, right? Top down has limitations, bottom up has limitations. Why do we combine the two? Because both of them have benefits that may cancel out each other's limitations,
True.
right?
I
So yeah, go for it, man.
I actually had like an analogy here. I wrote this down because I wanted to talk about this. So, if I were to just give you an analogy for combining them, just think of like your top down as kind of like a destination that you want to go to with like a GPS, and just think of bottom up as your like driving process, like just driving. You will account for like traffic and like road closures, construction, whatever, and you can change your path and you can still make it to your destination. But within both of these things, having like just one rigid part to go to like your destination, that's just going to be, it's not going to be super convenient, especially when there is, you know, divergence and construction, aka externals, during your path. And also just like, you know, driving without like a destination in mind can also become tiring, especially like mentally. um if you understand the analogy, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was trying to find a way to put in Nitin Gadkari ethanol somewhere there, right? But like I would also like this is one reason I would say, like, if you're an athlete and you work with a coach, you have to kind of ask them, like, dude, what's the plan for the next few months, right? Like, they need to have some semblance of top downness to it. Like, okay, you're coming to a coach and you have like an injury. You are coming to a coach that and you have certain like technical like deficiencies, or like these can also be top down constraints, right? You're injured and you want to ask your coach, okay, is this the move? Are we trying to like rehab the situation? Is there any technical deficiencies? Is that what we're going to work towards for a while? And that coach should have like a blueprint plan, like at least some semblance there, right?
Absolutely.
Because the coach may say like, oh, listen, doc, this block, the next few weeks, we're focused on like technical this thing, right? Again, I'll go back to the common person we know with Sune, right? I told Sune, like, doc, you're not
Stop thinking about
squatting
numbers.
like, yeah, right? Like, you're squatting like, you know, the Indian economy at the moment, right? It was a bit here and there, right? So what was our goal, right? I thought it may take 2 blocks to fix a squat. It seems to have fixed itself within 1 block, but every now and then certain things will emerge, right? So you want to kind of react to that thing, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like, you need to ask your coach, what's the long-term plan? And when things go wrong, you gotta ask your coach, what's the short-term solution for this thing? So that's like top-down, bottom-up kind of meeting into each other.
Just like a little side point to this, like not really fully related, but this is one of the reasons why you see a lot of people advocating for people to stop leaving coaches within like 2 or 3 months of joining.
Absolutely.
Because it takes at least that long to kind of just fix issues before we can start building strength, like especially if you're a newer or a beginner athlete who hasn't really you don't even need to be a beginner again with Sune.
Yeah. No, I'll give you so many examples of people like even like one of the people I coach, like she kind of has this issue with like bar drift, right? In terms of like when she squats, she has like a lateral bar drift that kind of happens, right? We thought it was cleared out, but it kind of shows up at a certain intensity standpoint. So I kind of like had to restructure her squat. And like essentially the pattern was like once it crossed a certain intensity threshold, this deficiency was coming. So what I understood the fact that it wasn't a competence issue. Like, she knew how to squat. It was just that at that certain intensity threshold, she didn't have the capacity at a certain leg to kind of do what we needed. Right. So I had an initial plan, right? And 12 weeks or whatever, 10 weeks later, that's where I wanted us to get. But by week 4, week 3, things look clear. Week 4, things looked a little dicey. So like now by week 5 and week 6, we just tackled it a certain way and it seems to have cleared up fair enough, right? So, but that's the thing is like neither Tapas nor I would argue, well, there are exceptions you can make to people, like you can predict these things, but the human system is evolving. It's hard to predict it with absolute certainty, right? That's why you'll see some of the best in the world get on stage and eat shit, all right? Because sometimes like the human
Russell
system
or
will just
Sheffield.
rapidly get there. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Because you can have things happen, right? You can have like these random external spikes, or you can have an umpteen number of things. So your programming system should have certainty, but also the certainty to deal with uncertainty.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, just like one more point. This is like exactly what we were talking about, like having flexibility, but also with rigidity, just in perfect amounts to make sure that this. Um, if initially when we were saying that you know, somebody with like a very rigid athlete lifestyle is better for a top-down approach, I'll just give you like another like just a statement that might help like a few people who still don't understand what like the seriousness of what we're talking about here with the top down being an issue directly. The thing is now with the top down approach, um, am I going off topic? It's still here, right?
No, man, no, man.
Yeah.
I think it's important. No, I think it's important to kind of understand this because this is how you want to think about it.
Exactly.
Right? People are like, how many sets, how many reps, what RP? You're like, dog, how was this person? How are you approaching them?
Exactly. So like this is what I was kind of just saying right now. Like if any of you still don't understand what we initially like try to convey or what the seriousness of that is. I'll just give you a blank statement. A top-down approach, if followed by anybody who's living somewhat of a normal life, like there will always, like if you follow it for long enough, there will always eventually just come a session which is going to say like it's going to be high intensity and you're just going to be under recovered. This is like, it's like a certainty that's going to happen. And when this happens, it's going to fuck up your training quite a bit. And the thing is, the only thing you can do to avoid this to have ideal conditions all the time, which you can't have. So do you understand what we were trying to say with flexibility now? Yeah. So to avoid this, we just kind of like, like to have like a double approach, just better for all of us, better for the common person who wants to be an athlete. And yeah, also I think this is one of the primary reasons why it took so long for us to kind of, for programming styles to kind of evolve, because people just used to not be able to follow the programming styles before, which were primarily top down heavy.
Yeah. And like you said, right? There are, I would also say, like, last thing is like, these are not absolutes. Like, there are there are like gray zones where like you can kind of see, right? For example, from pure top-down programming percentage-based approach, a guy might say 75%, right? From like 5 reps at 75% of your 1 rep max. For a pure bottom-up approach, you may see 5 reps at RP 5, right? I think style is around the same 75%. But like a middle range would be like, oh, 5 reps at RP 5, but this is the load range we want to work in. Like you get a suggested load range kind of a thing, right? So there's some certainty, some element of flexibility. And then the coach's notes will say, like, we want to stick to the RP. This is where I assume that the load range will be there. Like that's why when your coach gives you a load range with an RP point attached to it, like there may be reasonings for these things. There may be notes and conditions. But just to bounce off the Tapas, the like last thing I probably have to say on this is that what we are talking about is how do you approach programming?
Yeah.
Right? How do you approach screw that. How do you approach an athlete, right? You want to be rigid with certain things with the athlete, but you want to offer them flexibility. So your programming thought process should have an amalgamation of those two things. You are dealing with a human. This is not just programming alone. You need to have a top down, like you need to be stern with your athletes, but then you also need to kind of let them kind of like say things that they may need to say. All right. So even that athlete psychology element, you need to kind of think about top down, bottom up kind of a situation.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. Right. And so I think we can just wrap this up and move on to like the big three. The cycles, the macro, meso, and micro. I said big three, but yeah, no, just one last thing. I made a video on this recently. I just want to mention this here as well. With the bottom up approach, you see a lot of. This is one thing that I'm pretty sure people who are self-coached make this mistake a lot. If you're coaching somebody, you may also make this mistake, but it's like rarer. Don't like mistake responsiveness with reactive. Basically, like I read this somewhere. I don't remember the exact line, but basically, like the gist of what it means is that don't make changes of the basis of one session or like 1 week, because you do understand, yeah, flexibility. You can make changes of the basis of what's happening, and you can have an auto-regulated structure. But to make entire protocol changes, you need a little bit more data than a single session going bad or a single week going bad. Like generally, you wouldn't think to. I mean, I know we wouldn't think to say this, but I've seen like a few self-coached dudes who've approached me. Like they asked me to review their programming, and it's like a very simple thing. They keep making so many changes every few weeks.
Yeah, you don't know what works.
Yeah, it's very detrimental. You don't give anything enough time for your body to kind of just get efficient at to see what works better.
Is it like that meme from Dexter? That dude comes with a surprise, motherfucker.
Yeah.
You changed the program.
Yeah.
It is that.
Yeah, exactly.
So like when you kind of have this flexibility, like if you were to think about, okay, now we know that we need some rigidity and some, like you have ideas, right? We have ideas now. I'd say with top down and bottom up, like we have an idea. Like I would argue that macro, meso, and microcycles are how you package these ideas into like 3 different levels kind of a situation.
But before we explain that, let me just like give you guys like a base understanding. Basically, this is what we talk about when we talk about the structure of training over a longer span, and then structure of training in a shorter span within that, and a shorter span within that, to the point of a day. So this is how, like, you see a lot of people talking. They say that I'm in the middle of a hypertrophy block, like set of mesocycles, and I'm in the middle of a macro, and our goal is this. So a macro is just it's like a larger time frame. So yeah, we're just gonna explain what these are now.
So like again, that top-down approach thing that we spoke about, right? It talks about we're working towards something, right? This can be a competition that we're working towards. This can be managing an injury that is pretty severe, right? This can be
Improving work capacity,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
anything.
yeah, a whole host of things, but there's a larger goal, right? So we want to dedicate a certain window of time to this larger goal. All right. Um, so that's going to be like the larger macro kind of situation, right? The objective of the next, let's say, macro cycles can be like 10, maybe 16, 12, whatever. It can be kind of those like larger windows of time, right? So for these next 14 weeks, an athlete comes and says, like, I don't want to compete. I just feel all my lifts is shit, right? And I feel like I don't have enough like muscle mass or like whatever. We understand a few amount of issues that we have, right? So we want to kind of understand the next few months, we're going to focus on, let's say, movement quality, movement competency, local capacity, like just pushing good accessories, having structured plans. So we know a long-term window on what we are working towards. We are not working towards like pushing absolute performance and doing top end strength, but we're kind of creating an environment of like repeat training to kind of like arrive at a much higher baseline of strength. All right. So the question is, if the next 12 weeks are dedicated to that, do I need signals or RP 8 to 9, 10 in this? Right? Like the question is, if my larger goal is this thing of like getting good capacity and getting good like movement quality and all of these things, I know now that for this 10 weeks, that's my focus. So I can reverse engineer everything from there to
Exactly.
week one in alignment with that idea, right? So the macro idea is formulated, right? Now you have this large idea, and the problem is humans are kind of stupid, right? We lose track of things unless we compartmentalize stuff, right? So like I would kind of say like a mesocycle is, but you have this larger idea.
And
Let's
just
kind of chop these things into like little bricks of time, and let's say each of these things you and I have an objective to get to. So that's 12 weeks to get to this larger idea. Let's cut it to 3, 4 week windows of time, right? Each of these windows of time are dedicated to certain things. So what does that kind of mean? That's just the mesocycles, right? And I will just finish off by saying you have these smaller 3 windows of time. Cool. 4 weeks is a compilation of 4 individual weeks, right? And each of these individual weeks, you want to have an idea for that based on the larger picture. Like all of these weeks are working towards 4 weeks will work into one block or one mesocycle of training. For 3 mesocycles will also work into this larger macro cycle of training. And these individual weeks are your microcycles of
microcycles of
training.
training.
Right?
Yeah, and the mesocycle, as like Jay said, it's just going to be like a shorter time frame inside the macrocycle, which is focused on the goals of the macro. So the microcycle is going to be like a smaller, like it's just going to be a week, or it doesn't even need to be a week, to be honest. Like it can be different.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's just a shorter time frame inside the mesocycle, which is focused on the goal of the mesocycle itself. There's nothing really magical about the 7 day protocol. I just want to put that out there. The same thing you see a lot of people put out like the 4 week mesocycle as well. Like the 7 day microcycle and the 4 week mesocycle are like, you could say, universally just accepted more. They're the most common ones, but that does not mean that they're constrained to that. So I just want to put this out there as well. A lot of people run 8, 9, 10 day microcycles as well, and a lot of people run 4 day microcycles as well.
And you'll see like stronger guys are like compelled to kind of run like larger, like some guys will have like larger windows. Again, this is all in terms of how you read data and how you can kind of interpret it, right? So like we kind of want to understand like in the future episodes, like I think episode 3 will talk about objective markers. We want to kind of track towards like the objective markers of your current programming style may not allow for a 7 day programming structure, right? You may need like a 10 day thing or like something along those lines. Maybe your client does not have access to the gym and you need to have like, I don't want to wear off like agile periodization and all of this stuff. But largely what I'm saying is this is just the base rule. Once you understand the rule, you can deviate from it like anything else, right?
Just having this mindset, like don't have this limiting mindset that it can only be 7 days, because then you try to constrain it in that. And the thing is, like another thing just attached to this, like which can cause an issue, is like a domino effect. Fatigue management is as important within a microcycle as it is within a mesocycle. Like you see a lot of people. So if I were to say this like in a way that like the common powerlifter, or just like if you don't understand terminology to that extent, just think of the mesocycle as a block, and then you have weeks inside of that, right? And you more in like most programs you have them building up in intensity. Volume differences not as much, but yeah, people do change that as well. That's like a different methodology of programming. You see people focusing a lot on fatigue management within the mesocycle. deload weeks, reduced intensities here and there. You need to kind of focus on fatigue management inside the microcycle as well, with the structuring of the sessions themselves, making sure that you're able to show up on the days that it actually matters. Throwing sessions here and there of just the whim is not really going to work very well, because this is again, like, this is just something I want to put out from my personal experience, from the same, like, people that I've who ask me to review their programs and all. I asked them why they, like, put like these days after these, or like how they've structured it. It's a very general mindset that I've seen, that people assume that if you do the same day every single week for a while, you're going to see change. You will, but those days by themselves, their structuring matters as much as the weeks that you keep repeating them in.
Yeah. No, because I think like that is like super important. Like I had a guy recently join. We had like he had like a very interesting conversation. I just asked him, right, like, in your current programming structure, what day do you want to feel the strongest at? Because your program kind of has you aligned in a way in which you're gonna have like spikes of performance here and there. Like like SRA, when we discussed in the first week, that stimulus, recovery, adaptation, right? You want to structure your program where like there is a stimulus that allows, and the next session is where that adaptation kind of shows up. Right?
Yeah.
So when you are designing, I would say it like this: see, this larger window of time, the macro cycle, is as efficient as how you structure the microcycle, because that is the
Exactly.
first domino.
Exactly.
Right? The first microcycle, the first week will kind of hit into like the second, into the third, into the fourth, into the fifth. This is where like I tell people, like, again, I had to explain this, like, because we know them in common. Like, I had to explain to Sunay why, like, if you perform really well on week 4, it is a byproduct of what was done in week 3, right? Like, whatever comes prior allows for what is to come next. It's the adaptations you create in week 1 that allow for week 2, that allows for week 3, right? 2 will allow for 3, 3. Each of them, like, okay, like if I say week 2 allows for 3, 1 still has an impact on 3.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely,
I
absolutely.
mentioned that, right? But what I'm saying is that the most potent is what comes before that.
Yeah. And this
Right.
is also like, we talk about the fact of not overshooting in your first weeks. It's not just that you're going to ruin the the week itself, or you're going to, become more stressed recovery. It's also going to put an effect at the end of your block.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Kaushal gave like a very good line to me the other day. I just want to use that again. He said that if you start heavy, you will probably not be able to end heavy. And
Yeah.
that is like a that's like a sacrifice you will be making, most probably, if you do this, if you like overshoot in your first week in this sense.
Because I know some guys who like compare block two's week 1. So a mesocycle, right? A mesocycle can also be terminology as like a block of training, right? A block, like, yeah, right? So if you use that term interchangeably, just understand that, well, the macro is a large one. The meso is like the individual, like piece, and the micros are the day-to-days of those individual piece. And the mesos can be also termed as blocks, right? I know some guys, for example, who will feel like, I finished my first blocks week 5 at this thing. So I started 2 kilos under that in my second blocks week 1. And we're like, congratulations. You've just killed yourself.
I want to kill myself when I see that.
No, I like it when somebody sends me like a missed lift at like triple and RP 5 on week 1, right? Because that makes my life more exciting. Because I'm like, well, surprise, that
Nice.
was an RP 5.
It was just a boring Tuesday afternoon, not anymore.
Yeah, even 30 kilos overall, like projected like load cap. But now my life's exciting.
This is like just side point. This is one of the reasons I added suggested loads to my sheet.
Of course. No, see, this is why I threaten people with a gun. Right? Like, that's a joke. Or maybe, I don't know.
Hey,
Maybe.
yeah.
Maybe. But like, this is why I threaten people. I try to
For
convey.
legal reasons.
For legal reasons, all of these are
Jokes.
it's why you tell people like, dog, listen, we're on the same team, right? We don't want to claim insurance on health. We want to kind of actually make progress, right?
I don't
We
want to
want
hold you
people to
back,
see.
man. Just saying that. I don't want to hold you back. Just listen to me, please.
Because like they don't understand the factors. Like, I always think of it as taking a loan, right? If you keep taking loans from like in terms of fatigue from like future weeks, you're just
Good
gonna have to
analogy.
pay an interest you can't.
Yeah.
And like when you get to fatigue at some point, right? Like chronic and acute fatigue, like you kind of want to understand what are your, like when Kaushal says the fact that when you start super heavy, you're probably gonna end a lot lighter.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. When you start heavy, you can't end heavy. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. It makes total sense.
Right. So like you have this larger goal. Like let's say you have a goal at week 15 of competing. Understand the fact that week one of the first block, the first 4 week block or 5 week block or whatever it is, the first week, that is going to allow for week two, week three, week four, week five, week six, week seven, week eight, week nine, 10, right? It kind of builds into this thing. So you need to always give yourself a runway to take off.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm saying all this. I overshot my bench by 1 RP point today. Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I'd even say this thing to some people. Like, for example, like I've talked to a few coaches, like an overshoot for most people is like, well, I would say like bottom up is flexibility,
Yeah.
right? RP is also subjective. Like if back in the day, if at 83, you guys saw Owen Hubbard like powerlift, right? When Brett Gibbs and Johnny Candido were there, like Owen Hubbard from like the UK. That's okay. Panna is like a more like crazy example, right? You see him do a rep and
You won't know. Yeah.
right? And then he's like RP6.
Yeah.
And then you could actually do 4 more. So like an athlete profile also matters. I would say if it's over like maybe like a point over, like if I ask for a 5, you do a 6, I'm not really bothered. But if I ask for a 5 and you're like a 6.5, 7, then I'm like, maybe we want to kind of like
hold that back a little bit. Yeah.
And this is why I'll say, like, I think when like people want to, like, this is why we'll have to talk about the objective markers, right? You want to have things like E1 RMs that kind of show you where, like, what's going on. Like, you input the numbers and the E1 RM in your programming sheet just so stuck. And then you're like, even your athlete will start to see, man, there's some diminishing return here.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
I just want to talk about this also. I think this will like it'll just flow nicely with this. Like Willie P posted like a video yesterday about one of his athletes, and it was very interesting to see that basically she kind of failed a 490 something pound squat. I think 11 days out of count. Yeah, exactly. Like he did something which is pretty unconventional. He didn't like slow it down. He thought that she was actually understimulated, undertrained, and then they increased it. They did the primary day on a secondary. Sorry, they replicated the previous primary on a secondary day, and then like in comp she hit like a 500 plus pound squat, which is like more 10 or 15 pounds more than what she failed 11 days out. So having like this is like a sub point of the SRA curve that we talked about last time, and just being able to understand that him being able to do that, I was pretty impressed. I was like, oh damn, that makes sense.
Because in the most important thing is gonna be like, how do you interpret data? In like what is noise and what is signal, right? What is pointless? Like I'll say, a guy thinks loading more weight on the bar is like the pure signal, but in reality, it could be just white noise in the fact that it all shows that your E1 RM is crashing, right? You hit 130 at like RP5 or 135 at RP9. Well, there's something there to be kind of like, that's why even at every phase of training, right? Personally, I have guys who I have to like constantly remind of that technical drifts that they'll create, right? Old habits, right?
Yeah.
Right. Shout out to Shivans, like he kind of is someone that I have to like mention every now and then, like, don't get too excited, right? Like there's gonna be a rep where like we have a tendency for something, right? We kind of want to be mindful of that. He picks up now. I don't expect anyone to go from error to perfection. If they make 5 mistakes, can we make like 3? Right? Can we like kind of like titrate it down? Like the absolute pressure, I don't want to. So like when I look at a block of training, I'm not looking for week 1 to be perfect, week 2. I'm like looking at things that we could tweak here and there. Like what can we talk about? Where is the athlete responding to my feedback? So like every week, I think it's important to monitor. That's why like if you're an athlete and if you don't send your videos and your check-ins and you don't update your sheet, I hope you get violent diarrhea.
Absolutely, yeah. I thought you were going to say something like, I hope your pillow is warm, but yeah, that works as well.
Violent diarrhea all the time, right?
Yeah.
No. I would say the next topic, right? So like you've not talked about this macro. Then we talked about the blocks that comprise of this thing. Then we talked about the individual days and weeks, right? This is where like the bread and butter kind of situation starts to emerge, right? Of VFI, right? Volume, frequency, intensity, right? Like if you're writing a program, you are in theory manipulating to the greatest degree these 3 factors, all right? that is going to be like the most important thing we kind of want to understand, right? Like, how does an athlete kind of respond to this thing? Like, what are these individual concepts, and where can we kind of like understand that? Like, how do we kind of understand these things on a base level, right? Like, do you want to take the lead on this thing, VFI?
I could start.
Yeah. Or just for everyone, what is VFI, for example?
Oh, yeah. VFI is volume, frequency, and intensity. So essentially, we're just going to be, as Jay said, manipulating all of these. So when I talk about the structuring of days or the number of days, that's going to be like how frequently you're going to be training. Frequency, volume is like the absolute. So it's going to be sets into reps into load. So that's going to be how much volume you're performing in a session. Um, we do that with tonnage. Tonnage is fine, right? And
And it's just fun. Like, you'll have different systems. Like, volume can be sets times reps, total sets. Tonnage can be sets times reps times load. You can have different metric system measure these things, right?
exactly. And intensity is just how much you're going into it. So, wait. Oh, shit. Fuck me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, intensity is just how much you're going to be kind of going at it. So, when we talk about RPs, for example, that's when we talk about intensity.
Yeah. And like I'll kind of just throw some things around here, like so, like see, you'll meet some guys who kind of look at volumes only. It's only on the base of sets. You'll meet some guys who look at it like sets, like total reps done within a session, right? Um, you see people who kind of look at it in like both lenses. But when you talk about intensity, like you may come across a situation where someone says, well, there's relative intensity and absolute intensity, like and relative intensity, something that is relative in nature, right? Like an element of difficulty, or like an effort that has to be put. That's like RP, right? Relative intensity can be like these
It
RP
can be
quantities.
flexible. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Absolute intensity is like, well, like there's this 77%, that 79%, like 85% of like this absolute certainty that exists, right? So like both can be used, right? If you're going to use RP, you're going to use percentages. You will have relative and absolute intensity. You will have an amalgamation of the two. Where like a top set can be at a certain RP, back offs is fixed percentages of that. So you're kind of throwing, like when we get to top sets and back downs, the whole spiel on that thing, we'll kind of go into this thing. But like when you talk about intensity, when you talk about volume, when you talk about frequency, as Tapas said, these are the things we play around with. Volume is how much, intensity is how hard of that, how much, frequency is how often of those things.
And the
Right?
thing is, all of these, um, they go hand in hand. We already, I think, we told that. So you can't really have one without the other. So like you can't really have like intensity focus, completely intensity is in fuck completely intensity focused with no volume, completely volume with no intensity. That's going to not be able to produce enough stimulus.
Yeah, this is like the thing. Sorry to say this, like, but everyone can kind of understand this. You go to a gym and a guy says, yeah, a trainer will say, yeah, just go do 3 sets of 12. At what? Like, 3 sets of 12 at what? Right? Because there has to be a certain weight attached to it, or an intensity, or an RI, or an RP, or
Because you
something
can like
attached to it.
create you can create fatigue by doing like fucking 3 into 12, 4 into 10, whatever, but you it doesn't mean you're going to be creating stimulus. Like it doesn't mean you're going to be creating the sufficient stimulus required to grow, which you need intensity.
And I would say this thing is like, this is probably one of the most basic things that people should understand. You cannot see volume without looking at intensity, and you cannot separate these two.
Exactly.
Right? The simplest example of this, I'll say, if I were to say one rep at 100, no, like how many reps can I do 100% of my one rep max for? Like I've given you an intensity of like 100%. What is the volume I can do that for? One, all right? Like because like if I'm doing like an intensity thing of like an absolute intensity of 100%, I can't do for more than one in theory, right? Then it won't be like my 100%, right?
Absolutely.
The next example is a little sweet, like it's a little like there are exceptions. There are a lot of things to say in this thing, but like singular RP9 is about 95%. Let's say somewhere there, like athletes can have like different like RP profiles, custom RP charts. That's a rabbit hole we can go on different.
It's fine. We're talking on like a generalized scale. It's all good. Yeah.
So when someone says like that singular RP9, well, that's like if I were to say, Tapas, you're 95% of your one rep max, how many times could you take it? You probably be like that. When I say 95% of your one rep max, it's going to be that 1 to 2, maybe that
Maybe two.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe the efficiency, but it's curtailed to another thing, right? It's curtailed to an environment. You have to understand, if I give you a certain intensity, you are gonna have a volume attached to it, like in terms of like how much you can push that thing for a max.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So like when you look at volume and intensity, they are the two sides of the same coin. Right? There is a coin that exists, and that one side is volume, one side is intensity, but that coin exists. And what we call that coin is the dose. It is a training dose, right? It is the thing that we have, right? Every set that
Drum roll.
is a training dose.
Yeah. We needed like some sort of a drum roll at the dose, but yeah.
I don't get like post edit that shit. I don't know. I don't know how to use all this technology. I'm apparently an old man now, right? Tapas knows
We'll
all
do it, we'll do it.
this stuff. If the editing doesn't work, sue this man in a court of law.
Hey. But yeah.
But like largely the thing is like, so now we have a training dose. If I were to just tell Tapas like, okay, listen, now you have a single at RP8 followed by 5 reps at set like 75% of your E1 RM for that day, or 5% at a certain percentage, 5 sets. A single at RP8 followed by 5 sets of 5 reps at that day's like E1 RM, right? Is like, yeah, right. So that's like different training doses that I've given. I've given you a certain top end exposure. I've given you a little back end exposure. That 5x5 at RP, 5x5 at 75%. It can be like whatever, right? But that top set, these sets and these reps and these intensities attached, those are the doses that I'm administering to Tapas in his program, right? And you then can see, okay, I need a training dose here, but then I need another in another day. That how you distribute the training dose is frequency, right? Like if you look at our SRA like conversation, I think now you can understand, right? You have stimulus in a training dose on Monday. You always detrain by Thursday. Well, you probably need some
sort of stimulus in between the week then, yeah.
So you have a dose on Monday, you have a dose on Wednesday because, well, you may want to kind of peak it to Saturday, but by the time you get to Saturday, you're usually detrained. So you need like a minuscule dose there, like enough to kind of allow to get to Saturday. So when you think about primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary, centenary, right? All of these kind of like Steph Curry, whatever. My bad. I'm sorry. I had to like say that dumb shits, right?
Yeah.
So like, the reason I say for this is that it is just how you are distributing stimulus to kind of get to a certain day.
Yeah.
The dose of training is different, right? And you're sprinkling this shit to kind of get us to a certain outcome.
And just a side point, like this, the dose conversation here, this is kind of why we also, there's like so I recently onboarded a guy, and he for some reason keeps thinking that like him having the capability to only train for 4 days is a very major problem. He's like, I can't train for 6 days. I'm so sorry, my parents don't allow and all this. I just want to put this out there. You do not need to train for 6 days. Okay.
You balance.
Yeah. No. That's not what I meant to say. But yeah, you do not need to essentially train for like whatever. The whole point of like whatever we're explaining here is so that you're able to create a dose that works for you and distribute it in a way that works for you. You could train 3 days and still create adaptations very well and you could probably do it with somebody at the same rate as somebody else with your same amount of sets in a week, but you'll make more progress just because of how they're placed throughout the week, essentially. How the dose is given.
You can train 6 days a week and you can go in and max out every day and be a complete idiot.
Yeah.
Right. Or you can train 3 days because that's all you have. But like let's say, like, this is where I was telling someone, right? When you're structuring programs, you are building into a day.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
This is where, like, even within the microcycle, you want to have certain top-downness to it. Top-down in the sense that we need some rigidity that I am building into Saturday, right? If I want to build into Saturday, but always I show up the best on Tuesday, well, the training data kind of gives us good information as to, well, we're not potentiated on Saturday, but Tuesday shows up well. So then we want to kind of look at, that's where like good coaching and like data analysis will come into play, right? Like how spread of intensity, how is like interference in terms of like accessories and like how is soreness, how is like daily readiness, all of these things kind of like play into it, like spread of intensity, peak intensity, average intensity, or how are these things spread across the week? Like when you get to that, we'll talk about that. But you want to kind of have something you're working towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on the point of what you were saying about the having like a somewhat of a top-down thing during the microcycle as well. So what we mean by that is like, for example, you could have, let's say, a primary SBD day on a Saturday. Just putting this out there like an example. So when we say that, we literally mean you want to have your best performance on a Saturday. So what can you do on the other days to make sure that day shows up? And again, if I were to use your Jay's example, like again, let's just say you train on Monday and you want your best performance on Saturday, you get detrained. You can put another dose like in the middle of the week. So this is kind of how we want you to think about it. Like if you want one day to show up, just think about how it works. And also like shout out to that dude. Like the YouTube channel TSP Devon, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
his
Oh my God, the best channel.
yeah, his case studies are absolutely very helpful in sort of understanding this. When he creates like the program and like he talks about like how he's trying to build towards something, and then the way that he explains it, I really like it. Like you should probably go check him out. He's very underrated. I don't see like how he's not more famous, but yeah,
Yeah, and this is like where you kind of have to understand that you may sometimes be over the couch, you may sometimes be unstimulated. So you like someone comes into a certain day and they keep telling me like, Jay, listen, I score on Monday, and but by the time I get to like Thursday, um, I feel very fresh, but the bar feels heavy on my back. But these things feel like I don't understand what's happening. I've slept, I've done anything, I don't feel sore. So you're coming in too kind of recovered, right? So what can we do there, right? If Monday's dose does not carry to Friday or Thursday, let's say, can we beef up Monday's dose? Possible, right? Before we add another day, can we like so a certain dose of training is given on Monday? Can we restructure that dose so it carries to Friday, Thursday, right? We can't restructure. We've tried everything. Can we have like a pseudo stress kind of like, for example, sometimes when people say they don't feel pop in their legs, bar don't feel heavy, legs feel kind of like it doesn't feel stimulated enough, right? Hell, I might even give them like one of the TSP guys himself said this, right? Like if you have Monday and then you have Saturday, Friday, let's say, but you kind of come flat, some leg extensions on Wednesdays just to get some local stimulus there. That may kind of help us a fair amount in terms of kind of building into it. You can have pseudo stimulus. You can have an entire different squat day into that day, right? You like there are many different ways, right? Like you kind of have to think. Maybe I'm going off track. Stop me. I have a bit of like OCD, like ADSP. Which one of those?
everything. Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, little bit of everything, right? I got. I can't say that. We did that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is like, okay, before you add a third squat, like before you add a third squat in between, like ask yourself, like, is this client the best built for squatting on a frequent basis? They're built like Slender Man. They're not designed to squat on the seat.
Yeah.
So like their legs feel like crap.
You can get if you can get the stimulus in from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Just think about that as well. Like just think.
You want to get stimulus into their legs. They have access to a bell squat. Cool. Put them in bell squat, right? Get that legs to kind of like have some amount of stimulus, right? Put them in leg extensions. See, I like leg extensions because they're least invasive, right? They don't create a lot of systemic stress. They are shortened position bias largely. So that's like like that's one of the easiest tools you can throw into this stuff. And you gotta understand, like when you throw in the third squat day, you kind of like magnify the dose.
Absolutely.
It's just trying to create the entire. So like you have to understand, well, you're trying to build in the squat, but now Slenderman over here has squat a third day, and now his deadlift looks like a question mark, right? Because you have to understand, I don't need to like trash on anyone, but I got guys who come and like now they understand it. But when they came, like I was like, they said, I just want help on my deadlift and bench programming. Squat, I'm using this other program. I'm like, that is not how this. I can try and make that work, but that would probably
There's like a
not
whole
be
other
the
thing to
efficient way
consider here. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So like largely we want to kind of have people think like when you're creating that week of training, just largely understand. And this is the thing, right? This is where I keep coming back to this thing. And shout out to Norman for like smashing this fear out of my head, right? In the beginning, when you write a block of training, it's probably, like you have a best case, like guess an educated system. Like I let a guy plug into my system and things come well. Some guys plugged in, things come well, but one thing falls a bit away, right? So then I kind of understand that data didn't pick up the way I thought. And then I look at the objective markers on each day. And then I'll start to be like, okay, I want to make one small change, right? Like, for example, a client of mine, like her bench on like Wednesdays, like building into a Friday primary session. I understood the fact that one heavy single exposure wasn't enough. So gave her like a single and then a double followed by that, and then the rep work that we previously had. So I added 2 extra reps. All of a sudden, she goes up by like 6 kilos in terms of her bench. Right. For another person, I noticed that fatigue singles on a bench worked really well. But when I made them fresh to see how that would happen, bench felt 30. Right. For our Western viewers watching that, 30 means shit.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, that, and then just like another little thing to whatever just Jay just said, just like an addition to that, when you think about like changing dose and like different ways that you can add the stimulus, you don't of course, as we just discussed, you don't absolutely need the SBD movements. You can even give a warm up as like some sort of just to put in some stimulus before the movement itself. Like we spoke about goblet squats in the last episode. Excellent movement. So you can think of it like that as well. And just one point that I wanted to say from the beginning of like your thing. Just because the weight moves heavy does not mean that you're fatigued. Because like you could really just be understimulated. You could be over recovered as well. It doesn't mean essentially that you're under recovered. It can very much mean that you're over recovered as well, and that also kind of causes your bar to slow down. So this is sort of like a misconception that we want to kind of break. I'll make a reel out of this.
Yeah. Because that's the thing, right? Sometimes a person walks into the gym and says, man, I feel great. And they get out of the bar and they look like, well, I've shit the bed 5 times in the last 2 minutes, right? And they don't understand where it happens. So I'll kind of give you an example. Like there's a girl who I coach right now who had like that hip shift issue kind of to come up, right? Her secondary day, like I wanted to clean out her squat in terms of data, right? So like any top end exposures here and there, I kind of made it minimalistic. She had a bit of secondary top end exposure that when she comes in on a primary, it felt really light on her back and she could really build off of that thing. When we kind of removed that thing, I communicated her saying like, when you're removing it to kind of understand that you want to kind of build symmetry in your hips in terms of a lot of things, right? I don't want this hip shift to kind of get worse. And she would feel it like, like, so the data in that situation was like, well, primary days top set always felt like crap, right? When you remove that thing. But then her back offs like moved really well. Like her back offs moved at a rate in which you're like, man, the top set something kind of is weird there because that doesn't seem to perform well. But hell, the top sets are potentiating the back off really well and kind of. So then what do I look? Like if that top end exposure is like limited there, I will just go back to the days prior to that thing and I'll see, can I give a spike in top end exposure there? It doesn't have to be a single triple. It can be just like a same set at a higher intensity or something. All right. So don't have this fear in your head when you kind of remove something with a larger image, right? I could be programming for someone to peak. Something goes wrong. How do we kind of react to that thing, right? We want to have, I'd say we should have an entire episode dedicated toward like signal and noise and how to interpret data.
Absolutely. There's a lot of episodes we need to have. We keep coming up with new topics during the session itself. But yeah, it's pretty good. So yeah. So we spoke about dose entirely. I think we've explained pretty much everything. Also, just like a little pointer to everybody watching. If you've made this far, Jay's gonna give you. No, but actually, if you've made it this far,
pav bhaji, this time pav bhaji.
Pav bhaji, yeah. Jay's gonna give you a plate of pav bhaji. If you've made it this far, however, like no jokes aside, it's like a really good job. You probably have a good attention span. Yeah, we love you. And just one little thing, if you have any questions. I saw that. If you have any questions or any like doubts or whatever, like about anything that we talk, because we kind of like to wing it, like we kind of not wing it, but we like to talk. We
Professional.
Yeah, we like to discuss, and sometimes the topics do get like off track a little bit. So but we try to cover everything from the best of whatever we both can contribute. So if you have any doubts or any questions, just put them down there. There's no there's no hesitance to asking. If you ask, we will answer, because we're not we're not Joe Rogan yet, so
we're not that famous.
Yeah. So yeah,
I can't wait to blow up and act like I don't know any of you.
Exactly. No. I will. Yeah, anyways, you can ask any questions down below. All right. Yeah, let's continue.
Yeah. So like you have like, I would say like when you look at a dose response relationship, like we'll kind of get to these volume landmarks and like things on the next episode, but largely we want to kind of understand that you've given like volume and intensity. That's a training dose, right? You kind of like repeat it through like like multiple sets are like repetitions of that dose,
Hmm.
right? Um, and how you kind of spread it is the frequency that you can kind of see, right? So like what I would say is not all doses are created equal, right?
Absolutely.
There's going to be a dose response relationship. And if you hear that concept, this is probably the thing you want to understand the most, all right? Drum roll, like whatever that thing is. Like, dose response relationship is just like where, again, Norman taught me the most important things. Do not be emotional about outcomes, right? You're looking at, okay, for dose response relationship just means a dose has is implied on an athlete and they create a certain response. That response can be good,
Hmm.
meaning that the dose is positive. It's an N positive, right? So let's kind of like play around that, maybe magnify it a bit more. There is a dose response relationship that kind of comes as negative in nature, meaning that it isn't the outcome we want, right? So when you kind of come into that kind of a situation, I would just say, don't be afraid of that. It just kind of tells us, well, we now know what does not work, right?
Absolutely.
That narrows the window in terms of what will work thereafter.
Change your framing on this. Like essentially, even bad days can be interpreted as data, and taking them as like an emotional hit and just being down from that can do you more damage than the bad day itself.
And this is where, like, okay, this is where, again, my ADHD guy, I think, will go and ask me, like, Tapas, you like, threaten me to, like, kind of come back. But this is where I love emerging strategies like that
Yeah.
static microcycle block
Hmm.
structure. So, just a little cliff note this thing. So, if you've ever heard of Mike Teixeira, aka Powerlifting Jesus, like he is the guy who kind of like took the bulk scale and like like kind of created it into the
Hmm.
powerlifting like RP chart and the whole 9 yards, right? If you look at emerging strategies, one of the approaches that they have, like I know guys in emerging strategies who use like dynamic, like a mesocycle, like what they kind of do is like they'll create a week of training, right? Like so, usually athletes are used to week one is RP 5, 6, the week 2 6, week 3 7, week 4 is 8, blah blah blah. We kind of ramp up this thing. Emerging strategies kind of creates a situation where like that week one microcycle does not change. So you can have like a squat day, like 4 sets of 6 at like RPs 5, like RP 6 of like a certain high bar. A secondary primary can be a single at 8, followed by like 3 by 5 at a certain percentage of that. So what that kind of tells us is that what I love about that is because the microcycle of training is static and repeated week after week after week after week. What we need to kind of understand is that if on week 2 a single at RP8 is requested of someone, all right, that might not be the same as week 1. Like if week 1 was strong enough and the dose response relationship was a positive adaptation,
Hmm.
you are no longer that person when you come into week 2, right? So that singular RP8 on week 1 might have been like 100 kilos, but on week 2, singular RP8 might have been 105,
Hmm.
right? So you will kind of see, okay, there's this, the training is kept the same, like this golden microcycle of training, a golden microcycle because this week of training is yielding positive results week after week,
Wow.
even without
Yeah.
increasing R,
Hmm.
right? So you can have week 2 and you see an improvement in performance. Week 3, you may see a holding or a minute improvement in performance. Sometimes, like if you do the RTS long-term course, like the programming course, you kind of have to have a mindset of like, you'll see like some guys might give so many case studies in that. Like you'll have week 1, week 2, good performance, week 3, holding or maybe a bit, or maybe even big dip. Some guys will dip on week 4 real hard, but on week 5, they'll spike up like massively in terms of performance, and week 6, they'll crash again. So you can kind of almost see this thing of like a dose response relationship,
You
right?
can kind of predict it from there as well. Hmm.
Yeah, you're not gonna think positive, 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 positive.
Hmm.
You may have positive, stagnant, negative, hyper positive, stagnant, further hyper positive thereafter.
But
Right?
the thing is, when you zoom out, yeah, go on.
Yeah. No, go on, go on. Yeah, you're gonna make the best point.
Yeah, so like when you zoom out, this is kind of what we were initially talking about. When you zoom out, that graph just looks positive, but
Yeah.
it's going to be changing up and down throughout the meso itself. But again, we want to look at
Yeah.
the bigger picture here.
And if the graph looks negative, you then kind of have to
Hmm.
ask yourself, what is the athlete's feedback? What is it signaling? What can you tweak in that situation? Because again, I'll go back to data. If you don't have that data like in front of you, you don't know what you're like doing, right? Because yeah, newer lifters, maybe if someone lacks a ton of muscle mass, well, they get pissed into the wind and they still get stronger,
Yeah.
right? But zoom out, see E1RM, how is it trending, how is it performing, is this training style sustainable? Then you can understand, is your training dose, i.e. the volume and intensity given on a day, yielding results on the days we want?
Hmm.
Because you also want to understand, let's say like that secondary, primary day, the secondary day, like Agatha's coach, forgive me, I think Pavel is his name, right? Like it's slipped my brain right now. Agatha's coach says like the secondary day, we can look at it as something that builds, and primary is the day it expresses, right? I am nowhere close to him, but I still want to say like this, that primary day of week one is expressing strength, but there's also stimulus in there that builds into the next week's
Secondary
secondary,
day. Yeah.
right? You kind of have to, that's where Tapas said the most important thing is do not look at time as a 7-day thing, right? On Sunday, your sins are not forgiven, right? If you overshot like crazy on that, like the primary, the next week's secondary is what you are taking away from, right?
Absolutely.
But if you undershoot on that week's primary by significant amount, you're like, man, I was so much stronger. But you undershot everything. Well, secondary day may feel a little flat.
Another like big ass notice, just public announcement or whatever. Undershooting is almost as bad. Like it is as bad as overshooting. Again, I've seen so many posts and people online that it pisses me off. They're so proud of the undershooting on their primaries. It's okay, theek hai, whatever. But if you keep doing that consistently, you are not going to be getting the stimulus which was, needed to be imposed through your program. And that is going to put you off the path in the same way that overshooting would have.
Yeah. Like the thing is like because if you are consistently overshooting really heavily, the stimulus is so strong that the recovery in position is so high.
Exactly.
Right. But if it's like the stimulus is so little, then the problem is like
there's nothing
you
to
recover
recover
by the
from.
next day.
Yeah.
You may not even need to recover. It might have been like a detraining dose almost, right? When you get to volume landmarks in the next one, dose landmarks in the next episode, we kind of want to understand well, training is supposed to be hard, right? And if you are not trying, and this is what I also say, like athlete psychology matters. Like sometimes when a guy walks into the gym and you're like, dude, I have a triple at RP5 today. And that person is just talking to everyone. He's like on his phone. Dude, a triple at RP5 when you're locked in can be 5 to 7.5 kilos. I'd say a lot more. I don't know. That's just a random number I threw. But let's say like when someone's locked in, they get an extra 7 kilos. But when they're like lollygagging and like walking around, they may kind of not perform well.
Mindset matters a lot when it comes, and especially like this is an issue you see in the lighter weeks because people, it's like a it's like a cyclic effect. People assume that it's an easy week, hence they treat it in like just with less importance, and then they turn out to lift less, and then like because it's an easy week. And the thing is, you could lift more from the. I don't mean this to overshoot. Like, don't take this out of like context and be like, oh,
They'll blame you. Blame this man. Blame this man. You overshot your coaches and like lick him the Tapas's profile.
No, I don't mean to say that, but what I mean to say again, as Jay said, you could lift significantly, not significantly, but like you could lift more. Okay. And honestly, 5 kilos, especially on something like bench, yeah, significantly more. With locking in essentially, just having like a more focus in the gym. And why wouldn't you want to do that? Honestly, like why wouldn't you want to lift more? Isn't that like all of our combined goal, all of our combined obsession, if I were to like phrase it like that?
Because like the assumption that training is supposed to be easy, like again, I didn't grow up like powerlifting. I grew up like a little bit of boxing in my like I grew up with that stuff. So like I never understood the assumption of like, man, I feel a little tired. Like you're gonna feel tired training, right? There are days like I don't think you'll ever feel like 100% fresh. Maybe like before a comp or something, you may feel like 100% fresh because you kind of have good structure there. But
no point in being
kind of
afraid of the tiredness or fatigue.
yeah, like see, the problem with people is that they'll take this as like, oh, I don't have to be tired, I'm gonna fatigue max. And then you're like, Jesus Christ, that's not what I meant, right? Again, this is why, right? On our next episode, this is why I think you need to have a system of tracking objective measures.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? Like you can feel like shit, but your performance is really good. You can feel great, but your performance is shit, right? What is that weighed against? Is there like an E1RM tracker in your sheet or in your system, right? As fundamental as that thing, because that will tell you, right? There's fatigue, but is there enough of it that it's masking fitness? Like you'll have the fatigue fitness model, like you have SRA, you have fatigue fitness, you'll have gas, like yes, fatigue is a byproduct of effective training to some degree, right? Like when you're training, you're gonna get a bit of fatigue, right? But is that fatigue so high that it's gonna mask fitness in its entirety? Fitness is your performance, right? So you want to understand dose response like this. You when someone says there's a dose response relationship, it's positive or negative, you have to correlate it to something that is objective. Like in my sheets, I have E1 RMs. You type in, I did this weight, this many reps, and this RP, bang, that's your E1 RM. I'll know if the program is working then, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It
Also,
kind of tells me
yeah,
something.
when he said gas, he meant general adaptation syndrome, not
Yeah.
stomach gas.
Yeah. Not not like that's, you people will think that, people are freaks.
Yeah, I know
Right?
that. That's why I just wanted to clarify it.
Because I would say like I credit my entire success towards like guys like Kaushal, guys like Norman. Like I say like Norman told me something once very important where he was just like, you were a commercial lawyer, and did you ever slack off in terms of contracts? I was like, no, because it could expose the company to so much liability, right? And that too across multiple jurisdictions. He's like, you need to take that seriousness into your like powerlifting coaching approach, not in terms of how you coach, but in terms of how you create a system. Like, are you monitoring data? Like when I tell people like I want to create the sheet, the one that I did, it is because it's individualized to how I want to interpret data, right?
Makes sense.
So I think everyone should kind of have a system to interpret data because it'll make your life easier, right? You'll see if the program is working. And if it's, see, like I'll tell you this thing, like there's a kid named Supriyo who recently joined, like I'll just throw his name out. Dude, he undershot his Thursday session by a fair bit in terms of bench last week. And he was like, man, like Saturday really felt like heavy. Well, this guy, I kind of gave him like, see, that's where I was reactive. Like there was a bit, it was bit bottom heavy in terms of like like his response to this thing. So it became very top down in terms of week two. Man, he smoked his bench, right? Because I said like, you came the Saturday feeling fresh. Like you didn't feel any soreness or anything, but when you unracked, the bar felt heavy in your hands, right? That kind of tells me an indication of like technique is locked in, but like the bar kept feeling heavy at like top end. Right. So then I was like, okay, there's something that happened prior to this thing where the intensity was not sufficient enough, right? Because that's what the marker is. Today's performance is a result of the last time. So you kind of have to have like, I went told him like, dog, listen, right? This is the thing we want to kind of push into. Don't be afraid of that thing. Guy pushed into it, showed up on Saturday and smashed it out of the park.
That's how it is. That's how it. But yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've talked about everything. I think almost everything.
Yeah. And like the next episode, I think like it'll be like a fun little like kind of thing where
The next one is actually going to be pretty cool. Going to have to like just go back and just study a bit more just technicalities on that. But yeah, we are basically going to be teaching you how to apply everything that we spoke about today, just into real programming and just using that, understanding how to use that to actually grow. So as Jay said, like factors like E1 RM, how to actually use them, how to actually put them into like real world programming usage, how to use that to grow whatever. We're going to be talking about a lot of different factors as well.
progress and progression. You could even talk about progress and progress.
Sure, we can do that as well. Yeah, we'll have like a
Am I allowed to curse? Am I allowed to curse this deep into the episode? We get demonetized.
I don't think anybody's gonna like, I mean, I think there'll be like 2 people watching till now, so yeah, sure.
Yeah. Fuck Riverside.
Yeah. Yeah, actually we recorded. So this is like, if you were just here for the content, like you can leave, but like just like a little discussion. We recorded this yesterday, not yesterday, like a day ago, and we did like 40 good minutes, I think 40 minutes ish. And Riverside just said, well, too bad,
Yeah, Riverside is just like a podcast recording platform. I swear to God, Tapas is very diplomatic about it. My only statement about them is fuck Riverside.
The thing is, we thought that we could like use that and it would up the quality or whatever, so it wouldn't be this Google Meet. A lot of you might be thinking, why is it still the Google Meet? Yeah, that's why. Because we tried, and that shit, it robbed us of 40 minutes of very good podcast, and then yeah. Yeah, exactly.
No, but like on my end, I just want to say thank you to anyone who stuck around for this long.
Yeah.
Like we said, we want to kind of build these foundations. We want to bring the best coaches around the world to speak to you guys. I think that's important. I will always say this. With every mentorship, with every client that I get, with every person that I work with, I realize how many limitations I have. And I am always grateful to the people I learn from. I think I am a byproduct of like great minds kind of
Absolutely.
being like having access to them and working with them. And I think everyone should have access to that thing. We want to bring these people, we want to kind of bring, like, we'll be bringing some big guests
Yeah, yeah.
in terms of those things,
Not
right?
going to
And
not
yeah.
going to fully spoil it, but yeah, it's going to be pretty nice.
Yeah, and they're generous humans, right? They
Hmm.
actually have a passion for the sport. They're not in it just for purely the financial reasons, right? You can really tell that. Like I always give him his flowers. Like Norman, when he kind of really like spoke to me, like he may never see this, but the impact he's had on my life in terms of thinking as a human being is immense, right? Uh, he really is what I would call a mentor. Like I do his mentorship because I truly think the man is an actual mentor. And we want you guys to have access to that as well,
Yeah,
right? All for the small price of 70,000 rupees a week.
a week. Yeah, a week. Don't
Package with a package subscription.
you can pay only for like 8 weeks at once, nothing below that. Yeah.
Yeah, below that. Yeah, it's done. It's done.
Uh,
But yeah,
again, like this was a joke. Okay. Yeah, but yeah.
maybe.
Maybe. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We hope you found it informative, found it helpful. We hope there was some value in our conversation that it just
And
brought
fuck
you alive.
Riverside.
And fuck Riverside, of course. Yeah, I said it as well now. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We'll see you in the next one where we teach you how to apply. And yeah, it's gonna be a good one. Stick around and subscribe if you wanna. Bye bye.